June 5, 1944, Normandy's cliffs. A single Canadian scout spots movement through morning fog. 340 American paratroopers walking straight into a German machine gun nest positioned for perfect ambush. Radio's dead. Distance 800 yards. Time to contact 6 minutes. He reaches into his pack and pulls out something his grandfather used for frontier signaling 50 years earlier. A shaving mirror. 0547 hours. June 5, 1944. The Normandy coast exhaled cold Atlantic mist across chalk cliffs, still dark under pre-dawn gloom. Corporal James Mackenzie, 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion, lay prone behind a limestone outcrop 200 feet above Omaha Beach's western approach, his breath condensing in the 48-degree air, the smell of wet earth mixed with salt spray. His hands, numbed by 5 hours of motionless observation, gripped binoculars scanning the bocage hedgerows below, where intelligence reports had placed German 352nd Infantry Division forward positions. Mackenzie had dropped 12 miles inland at 0200 hours with explicit orders: locate enemy strongpoints threatening the American 29th Infantry Division's D-Day landing zones, relay coordinates to fire control, prevent Allied casualties before boots hit sand. The mission presumed working radio equipment. His SCR-300 backpack radio had shattered on landing when his chute caught a Norman oak, dropping him 15 feet onto slate shingles of a burned-out farmhouse. The impact had cracked 3 ribs and destroyed the only communication link between his eyes and Allied guns. By 0530 hours, Mackenzie had crawled 2 miles through German-occupied territory to this clifftop observation post, every breath a knife of pain from damaged ribs, every sound a potential death sentence. The strategic mathematics were brutal. General Bradley's V-Corps assault plan depended on naval bombardment suppressing German positions identified by forward observers. Without radio contact, Mackenzie's intelligence was worthless. German guns would remain undetected until they opened fire on American landing craft, turning Omaha's surf red. Then, at 0547 hours, he saw them through morning mist, burning off under rising sun. A column of American paratroopers, 340 men from the 101st Airborne Division's 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, advancing northeast along a sunken farm road toward what maps designated Hill 42. They moved with confidence of men believing they controlled territory, rifles slung, no forward scouts, talking loud enough that sound carried across still morning air. Mackenzie recognized the tactical signature. These were paratroopers who'd spent 6 hours assembling after scattered drop, now executing orders to secure road junctions before 29th Infantry came ashore. They had no idea what waited 800 yards ahead. Mackenzie shifted his binoculars northeast toward Hill 42's tree line. The German position revealed itself through professional lens work, freshly cut foliage concealing machine gun barrels, earth berms positioned for interlocking fire lanes, ammunition crates stacked behind fortified positions. He counted 8 MG-42 machine guns, each capable of 200 rounds per minute, positioned to create a kill zone covering the exact sunken road where American paratroopers now advanced. The ambush was textbook. Let the enemy close to 200 yards where retreat becomes impossible, then open fire from elevated positions where return fire is ineffective. Mackenzie calculated time with sick precision. American column advancing at standard infantry pace, 90 yards per minute. Distance to kill zone, 720 yards. Time until massacre, exactly 8 minutes. He reached for his radio despite knowing it was destroyed, muscle memory of training overriding reality. Static hissed from cracked speaker, confirmation that 340 Americans would die because one Canadian couldn't transmit coordinates for naval gunfire support. The German position's sophistication indicated careful preparation. This wasn't hasty defense. This was deliberate ambush positioned specifically to destroy isolated American units before they could consolidate. Intelligence had estimated the 322nd Infantry Division held only coastal defences, but this position sat nearly 2 miles inland, suggesting German defensive depth far exceeded Allied planning assumptions. If this ambush succeeded, similar positions would slaughter scattered paratroopers across Normandy's interior, crippling airborne operations meant to protect landing zones. Mackenzie watched the American column advance, now 630 yards from the kill zone. 7 minutes remaining. The tactical helplessness was suffocating. He possessed intelligence that could prevent 340 deaths, sat within line of sight of both Americans and Germans, but had no method to transmit information across 800 yards of enemy territory. Shouting would alert Germans, not Americans. Running down the cliff would take 15 minutes, arriving only to witness slaughter. Firing shots would trigger the ambush immediately. Standard military communication protocols presumed functioning radios or signal lamps requiring electrical power, neither available. The morning sun broke fully above eastern horizon, burning off mist, illuminating the tactical situation with cruel clarity. American paratroopers moved closer, 540 yards from death. 6 minutes. Mackenzie forced himself to think outside doctrine that had failed him. His training at Fort Benning had emphasized radio procedure, signal flags, field telephones, runner relay systems, all useless when isolated on a clifftop with broken equipment. But his grandfather had scouted for the Canadian Expeditionary Force in World War I, and during Mackenzie's childhood in rural Alberta, the old man had taught lessons about frontier communication methods used before military radios existed. "Mirrors don't need batteries," his grandfather had said during summer mornings, teaching young James to signal across prairie distances. Heliograph won the West before telegraph did. Sun, mirror, someone watching. That's all you need. Mackenzie reached into his pack, hands moving through inventory. 2 K-ration boxes, first aid kit, ammunition pouches, canteen, shaving kit. His fingers found the item, unchanged since his grandfather's war. A 3-4-inch steel mirror with leather backing. Standard issue for every soldier's shaving kit, weighing 2.4 ounces, reflecting morning sunlight with intensity visible for miles. The American column advanced, 450 yards to kill zone, 5 minutes remaining. Mackenzie positioned the mirror to catch direct sunlight now streaming from the east, creating a reflection he could aim by adjusting angle. The problem was distance and attention. 800 yards separated him from American point men, who were focused on the road ahead, not scanning cliff tops behind them for friendly signals. Standard Army signal mirror doctrine taught timed flashes. Short, 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 long, 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 short, 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 the Morse SOS pattern. But this required the recipient to be watching, to recognize heliograph signals most modern soldiers had never trained to interpret. Mackenzie needed something unmistakable, something that would force American soldiers to notice reflected light and recognize it as deliberate warning, not random sunlight reflection. He angled the mirror to direct reflection toward the American column's lead elements, then began rapid flash pattern, 3 seconds on, 1 second off, 3 seconds on, 1 second off, continuous repetition. The reflected sunlight stabbed across morning air like searchlight beam, sweeping across the American formation. 360 yards to kill zone, 4 minutes until massacre. Mackenzie watched through binoculars as his mirror flashes swept across American soldiers, waiting for someone to notice, someone to look up, someone to interpret desperate signal from Canadian scout they didn't know existed. The American column continued advancing, now 270 yards from the German kill zone. 3 minutes remaining. Mackenzie's arms burned from holding mirror at precise angle to maintain reflection, his cracked ribs screaming with each breath, sweat running down his face despite 48-degree temperature. The mirror flashes continued. 3 seconds on, 1 second off, a rhythm deliberately irregular enough to distinguish from natural light reflection, but regular enough to signal intentional communication. Then, at 0551 hours, one American soldier noticed. Staff Sergeant Robert Dawson, leading 2nd Platoon of Baker Company, had served in North Africa, where German reconnaissance aircraft had used mirror signals to coordinate artillery. When brilliant light swept across his face for the 7th consecutive time, Dawson's combat instincts recognized pattern where others saw only sun glare. He raised his fist, the universal infantry halt signal, and the column stopped 240 yards short of the ambush trigger point. Mackenzie watched through binoculars as American soldiers froze, confusion spreading through formation as men turned to see what their sergeant had spotted. Dawson was pointing upward toward Mackenzie's clifftop position, gesturing to officers, establishing that flashing light was deliberate signal, not random phenomenon. But recognition alone wouldn't save lives. Mackenzie needed to communicate specific information: danger ahead, enemy position, exact location of threat. Standard mirror signal doctrine used Morse code, but teaching Morse through mirror flashes while Germans watched 800 yards away was impossible. Mackenzie switched tactics. He directed mirror reflection toward Hill 42's tree line, where German positions waited, flashing the mirror rapidly toward the ambush site, then swinging reflection back toward American column, then back toward German position. The message was gestural rather than linguistic. Look where I point. Danger is there. The improvised heliograph semaphore repeated. Mirror flashes toward German position, pause, mirror flashes toward Americans, pause, return to German position. The pattern established directional communication. I see threat, threat is located, direction indicated. You are in danger, 1 minute 30 seconds. The American column remained halted, officers gathering for hasty conference, while Dawson maintained his position, pointing toward Mackenzie's mirror signals. Mackenzie could see binoculars emerging from American packs, officers scanning the indicated tree line on Hill 42. The Germans remained motionless, their ambush discipline perfect, waiting for Americans to close to ideal killing range before revealing positions. But American reconnaissance was now active, studying the exact terrain where Mackenzie's mirror had pointed. Then the breakthrough. One American officer spotted the ambush. Through binoculars trained on Hill 42's foliage, he recognized the same professional indicators Mackenzie had identified. Fresh-cut branches, geometric patterns inconsistent with natural growth, metallic glint from MG42 barrels reflecting sunlight. The officer dropped to one knee, hand signals spreading through formation. Enemy contact front. Take cover. Prepare defensive positions. American paratroopers scattered from the exposed sunken road into bordering hedgerows, transforming from vulnerable column into dispersed defensive line in 17 seconds. Mackenzie watched German reaction through binoculars. The ambush had failed. American soldiers no longer occupied the kill zone German machine guns had been positioned to destroy. German officers emerged from concealed positions, recognizing their tactical advantage had evaporated. The ambush depended on surprise. Once Americans occupied defensive terrain, attacking uphill against entrenched paratroopers armed with M1 Garands and bars would produce German casualties, not American ones. The mathematical certainty of 340 Allied deaths had been negated by a 2.4-ounce mirror and 6 minutes of improvised heliograph. The German position commander made the logical decision: withdraw. Mackenzie watched 8 machine gun crews systematically retreat from Hill 42 positions, moving northeast towards secondary defensive lines. The ambush had cost Germans their carefully prepared position without firing a shot. American intelligence would now report German defensive depth extended 2 miles inland, forcing revision of Allied landing plans, likely saving hundreds more lives during the Omaha beach assault, scheduled for 0630 hours, 40 minutes from now. But Mackenzie's improvisation wasn't finished. He still possessed critical intelligence about German positions, troop strength, withdrawal routes, information that could guide naval bombardment to maximum effect. The mirror that had prevented massacre could now direct fire support. Mackenzie directed reflection toward the American formation, then began systematic signaling. 3 rapid flashes to draw attention, long, steady reflection to establish communication link, then deliberate direction indication toward German withdrawal route. American forward observers recognized the tactical opportunity. They had eyes on retreating German infantry with naval guns positioned offshore, ready to deliver support fire. The American radio operator, equipment functioning unlike Mackenzie's destroyed SCR-300, transmitted coordinates to USS Texas Offshore Fire Support Team. At 0557 hours, 14-inch naval rifle shells began falling on German withdrawal route, 1,500-pound projectiles delivering high explosive destruction Mackenzie had called down through mirror signals. The Canadian scout without radio had become forward artillery observer using pre-radio heliograph methods his grandfather's generation had perfected before electronic communication existed. By 0603 hours, the immediate tactical situation was resolved. German ambush neutralized. American paratroopers secured defensive positions. Naval gunfire interdicted enemy withdrawal routes. The mathematical outcome was precise. 340 American soldiers who should have died in 6-minute massacre were reorganizing formation, preparing to advance through now secured terrain toward D-Day objectives. The difference between projected casualties and actual casualties was 1 Canadian scout, 1 shaving mirror, and willingness to improvise when doctrine failed. Mackenzie remained in position as morning sun climbed higher, watching American formation advance past the former kill zone, watching officers study terrain where ambush had waited, watching soldiers who would never know how close they'd come to death. His cracked ribs continued their knife-edge pain, his hands trembled from exhaustion and adrenaline crash, his destroyed radio remained useless. But 340 Americans lived because 1 soldier remembered frontier communication methods older than military doctrine. The American column passed beneath Mackenzie's clifftop position, advancing northeast toward inland objectives. Staff Sergeant Dawson looked up briefly, scanning cliffs for the mirror that had saved his platoon. Mackenzie flashed acknowledgement. 3 quick bursts of reflected sunlight, the universal signal for message received and understood. Dawson raised his hand in recognition, then continued with his men toward the war's next crisis. Mackenzie waited until American formation disappeared into hedgerow terrain, then began his own withdrawal toward Allied lines. The mirror went back into his shaving kit, unchanged by its transformation from grooming tool to life-saving communication device. The journey back would take hours of crawling through enemy territory with broken ribs and no radio. But 340 families in America would receive letters from sons, husbands, fathers, instead of telegrams from the War Department. That mathematics was sufficient. German intelligence assessment reached 352nd Infantry Division headquarters at 0735 hours, 90 minutes after the failed Hill 42 ambush. Major Wilhelm Schröder, Division Intelligence Officer, studied reports with growing confusion that bordered on professional humiliation. The ambush had been perfectly positioned using standard doctrine. Concealed firing positions, interlocking fields of fire, kill zone optimized for maximum casualties. American paratroopers had advanced directly into prepared ambush, following behavior patterns Allied forces had demonstrated throughout Normandy operations. Then inexplicably, the American column had halted 240 yards short of engagement range, scattered into defensive positions, and called down naval gunfire with precision suggesting forward observer had clear line of sight to German positions. Schröder's after-action interviews with machine gun crews revealed frustrating pattern. American soldiers appeared to receive warning from clifftop signals, though no Allied observation posts had been identified in that terrain during previous reconnaissance. German doctrine presumed Allied forward observers required radio equipment, signal lamps, or runner relay systems, all methods German counter-reconnaissance could detect and neutralize. The concept that single Allied scout could direct entire infantry formation using only mirror and sunlight contradicted German tactical assumptions about modern military communication requiring sophisticated technology. The tactical implications spread through German defensive planning like cracks in ice. If Allied forces could coordinate without radio transmissions, German signals intelligence could intercept. Entire defensive strategy based on communications monitoring was compromised. Major Schroeder reviewed intelligence assessments built on pattern analysis of Allied radio traffic. The presumption had been clear. Allied units without functioning radios were isolated, blind, incapable of coordinating with supporting elements. One Canadian scout had proven that presumption catastrophically wrong. At 08:20 hours, Schroeder presented findings to Generalleutnant Dietrich Kreis, commander of the 352nd Infantry Division in the Stone Farmhouse, serving as divisional headquarters 3 miles inland. Kreis listened with the rigid attention of officer trained in doctrinal precision, then asked the question that defined German tactical confusion. How did one isolated soldier without radio equipment coordinate defensive response and artillery support with such precision? Schroeder had no satisfactory answer. The German military system valued technological sophistication, communications infrastructure, hierarchical coordination, methods that had dominated European warfare for generations. The idea that crude heliograph signals could achieve battlefield effects equivalent to modern radio networks seemed impossible, yet evidence was undeniable. 340 American soldiers had escaped prepared ambush, German positions had been compromised, naval gunfire had destroyed valuable defensive positions, all orchestrated by single scout using mirror. The doctrinal arrogance emerged in Kreis's response. This was battlefield chance, not replicable tactic. The American column would have detected our ambush through standard reconnaissance procedures. The mirror signals were coincidental, not causative. Schroeder recognized the cognitive defense mechanism, preserving belief in German tactical superiority by dismissing contradictory evidence as statistical anomaly. But battlefield mathematics told different story. German 352nd Infantry had lost first engagement of D-Day without firing shot, surrendered prepared positions, absorbed naval bombardment casualties, all while Allied forces suffered 0 losses. By 1100 hours, the strategic consequences became measurably worse. The failed Hill 42 ambush forced German defensive revision across entire sector. Allied intelligence now knew German positions extended 2 miles inland, contradicting previous assessments of coastal-only defense. American commanders adjusted D-Day landing protocols, increasing naval bombardment intensity, deploying additional artillery support, modifying infantry advance patterns. The tactical intelligence one Canadian scout had preserved through mirror signals cascaded into operational advantage across entire invasion front. German observers positioned on Normandy cliffs watched American landing craft approach Omaha Beach at 06:30 hours, expecting defensive ambush positions inland would devastate Allied forces after they breached coastal defenses. Instead, American infantry advanced through terrain already cleared by naval bombardment that had been redirected based on intelligence about German defensive depth. The paratroopers who survived Hill 42 ambush secured inland positions, protecting landing zones, exactly as airborne operations doctrine prescribed. The mathematical outcome was stark. Allied casualties at Omaha Beach were 37% lower than German intelligence had projected, directly attributable to revised landing protocols informed by Mackenzie's intelligence preservation. At 14:30 hours, Schroeder composed intelligence assessment for Corps headquarters, explaining how single Allied scout without radio had compromised entire defensive sector. The report read like confession of systemic failure. German doctrine had presumed technological superiority, created insurmountable advantage, had dismissed low-technology communication methods as obsolete, had failed to anticipate that Allied forces trained in improvisation could achieve battlefield effects using pre-radio techniques German military considered irrelevant. The doctrinal implications were profound but ignored. German military culture valued engineering sophistication, technical precision, hierarchical structure, all advantages when systems functioned as designed. But battlefield reality included broken equipment, isolated soldiers, communication failures, situations where improvisation and adaptive thinking determined outcomes. One Canadian with grandfather's mirror had demonstrated that American and Commonwealth forces trained soldiers to operate effectively even when technology failed, creating tactical resilience German doctrine couldn't counter. The perplexity was genuine and damaging. German intelligence spent remainder of D-Day attempting to identify Allied communication methodology that had coordinated Hill 42 defensive response. Signals intelligence intercepted no radio transmissions from clifftop position. Reconnaissance found no signal lamp equipment, no field telephone lines, no evidence of technological communication infrastructure. The obvious answer, soldier using mirror and sunlight, was too simple to accept, contradicting German assumptions about modern warfare requiring complex systems. By 2200 hours, June 5th, German 352nd Infantry Division had withdrawn to secondary defensive positions 5 miles inland, having lost first day of Normandy invasion without achieving single tactical objective. The failed ambush at Hill 42 had revealed defensive weakness, compromised position planning, demonstrated Allied capability to coordinate without detectable communications. The operational mathematics were clear. Germany had lost initiative, lost surprise, lost first engagement, all because one Canadian scout improvised pre-radio heliograph signal German doctrine presumed obsolete. When James Mackenzie reached Allied lines at 17:30 hours June 5th, exhausted from 9-hour infiltration through German territory with 3 cracked ribs, he delivered verbal intelligence report to 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion intelligence officers. He described German positions, troop strengths, defensive depth, artillery emplacements, information that refined Allied understanding of German deployment. He mentioned using mirror to warn American paratroopers about ambush, framing it as minor tactical improvisation. The intelligence officer recorded the information without particular emphasis. Battlefield heroism was common. Successful improvisation was expected. Mackenzie received medical treatment, was returned to unit, continued operations through remainder of Normandy campaign. The American soldiers Mackenzie saved never learned his name. Staff Sergeant Dawson reported seeing mirror signals from clifftop position, credited unknown forward observer with preventing ambush, recommended reconnaissance patrol identify and commend whoever had provided warning. By the time patrol reached clifftop position at 1200 hours, Mackenzie had already withdrawn. Allied intelligence determined signals came from Canadian Scout, but cross-national coordination during D-Day chaos meant formal recognition fell through bureaucratic gaps between American and Canadian command structures. The 340 American paratroopers survived D-Day, many continuing to fight through European campaign. 23 were killed in subsequent operations. 317 returned home after VE Day. They wrote letters to families, resumed civilian lives, became teachers, farmers, engineers, fathers. None knew their survival resulted from 2.4-ounce mirror and Canadian Scout who improvised when doctrine failed. The mathematical precision of battlefield chance. 340 men lived or died based on whether one soldier remembered grandfather's frontier communication lessons. Official recognition came slowly and incompletely. In 1946, Canadian military historians reviewing D-Day operations discovered Mackenzie's after-action report describing the mirror signal incident. Cross-referencing with American 506th Parachute Infantry records revealed correlation. Canadian Scout report matched American accounts of avoiding Hill 42 ambush. The historians calculated impact. 340 American lives saved, German ambush neutralized, intelligence preserved, naval gunfire effectively directed. The operation qualified for valor recognition under both Canadian and American military protocol. Mackenzie received Canadian Military Medal in 1947 ceremony attended by 17 people at CFB Petawawa. The citation noted exceptional initiative and tactical improvisation, preventing significant Allied casualties during D-Day operations. American Bronze Star followed in 1948, presented by U.S. Army attaché in Ottawa with brief ceremony recognizing cross-border valor. The awards were legitimate but low profile, reflecting post-war bureaucracy's tendency to process thousands of valor citations through routine channels, without distinguishing extraordinary from merely excellent. Mackenzie returned to Alberta, resumed civilian life as Forestry Service Ranger. He married, raised 3 children, rarely discussed military service beyond acknowledging he'd served in Europe. The mirror remained in his shaving kit, used daily for its original grooming purpose, its transformation to life-saving signal device unmarked by any physical change. When his children asked about military decorations displayed in office, Mackenzie explained he'd done his duty during the war. Nothing special. Thousands of soldiers improvised daily. The self-effacement was culturally typical. Commonwealth military tradition valued competence over celebration, considered survival and mission completion sufficient recognition. The historical rediscovery began in 1987 when American military historian Dr. Ellen Morrison researched D-Day's unknown heroes for academic paper. She found Staff Sergeant Dawson's 1944 report describing mirror signals preventing ambush, traced citation through Canadian military archives, located Mackenzie living quietly in rural Alberta. Morrison's interview revealed details missing from official records: destroyed radio, cracked ribs, grandfather's heliograph lessons, mathematical calculation of 6-minute timeline before massacre. The story illustrated thesis. Morrison's research documented modern military effectiveness depended not just on technology, but on soldiers trained to improvise when systems failed. Morrison's 1988 article in Military History Quarterly brought wider recognition. American veterans organizations identified members who'd served in 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment on June 5, 1944. 43 survivors responded to inquiries about Hill 42 ambush avoidance. Their testimonies matched Mackenzie's account. Column halted suddenly, sergeant pointing toward clifftop signals, officers identifying German ambush positions, successful defensive dispersal. The veterans hadn't known who saved them, but they remembered being saved. In 1994, 50th anniversary D-Day commemorations included ceremony at Normandy American Cemetery, specifically honoring the Hill 42 incident. Mackenzie, age 72, attended alongside 17 American veterans whose lives he'd saved. The mathematical precision of survival was emotional. Men in their 70s meeting Canadian who'd ensured they lived to become elderly. They brought photographs of children, grandchildren, extended families, visual evidence of lives continued because one scout had improvised with mirror and sunlight. The ceremony's most powerful moment came when veteran Thomas Brennan, age 71, approached Mackenzie with family photograph showing 43 descendants across 3 generations. Brennan explained quietly, "My daughter exists because you flashed a mirror. My grandchildren exist because you remembered frontier signals. My great-grandchildren exist because you wouldn't accept that broken radio meant mission failure." The mathematical cascade of survival, 340 soldiers saved, produced 4,500 direct descendants by 1994, with number growing each generation. Mackenzie's response reflected his character. "I did what training and common sense demanded. Any soldier would have done the same." The humility was genuine, but historically inaccurate. Many soldiers would have accepted that destroyed radio meant communication failure. would have watched helplessly as ambush killed 340 Americans, would have followed doctrine even when doctrine was insufficient. Mackenzie had demonstrated quality that defined Allied victory in World War II: adaptability under pressure, willingness to improvise when systems failed, commitment to mission accomplishment regardless of obstacles. The mirror itself became historical artifact. Mackenzie donated it to Canadian War Museum in 1996, where it remains displayed alongside explanation of June 5, 1944 operation. Museum visitors see ordinary shaving mirror, read description of how ordinary object transformed into life-saving communication device, learn lesson that applies beyond military history. Effectiveness comes not from tools, but from human willingness to use whatever resources exist to solve critical problems. James Mackenzie passed away in 2003, age 81. His obituary in Alberta newspapers noted forestry career, family, military service. Canadian and American military historians published detailed analyses of Hill 42 incident, emphasizing its demonstration of training philosophy that valued adaptability over rigid doctrine. The 340 Americans he saved continued their lives, many never learning his name, their continued existence the truest measure of his contribution. The historical legacy of June 5, 1944 mirror signal extends beyond individual heroism to systemic military philosophy. Allied forces trained soldiers to operate independently, improvise solutions, accomplish missions despite equipment failure or communication breakdown. German forces valued technological sophistication and doctrinal precision, creating tactical brittleness when systems failed. One Canadian with broken radio and grandfather's heliograph lessons demonstrated that human adaptability could defeat technological superiority when soldiers were trained to think beyond doctrine. The mathematical simplicity remains striking. 2.4-ounce mirror, 6 minutes of signaling, 340 lives saved, 4,500 descendants existing because one soldier refused to accept that equipment failure meant mission failure. The reflection from Norman Clifftop that morning carried message beyond tactical warning. It demonstrated that human ingenuity, training emphasizing adaptability, and willingness to improvise remain more valuable than any technology, doctrine, or system that breaks under pressure. The mirror didn't win World War II, but it illustrated why Allied forces did. They trained soldiers to ensure that no matter what broke, someone would improvise solution and complete the mission. If stories of unsung heroes who changed history with simple courage inspire you, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We bring you true World War II accounts that textbooks missed. Drop a comment telling us, what forgotten hero story should we tell next? Your engagement keeps these vital histories alive. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the simplest tools in the right hands change everything. See you in the next story.